Good morning. As we go to the Chitas of today, we're holding the new book, third book of the Torah, Parshas, book of Vayikra. We're holding Vayikra, chapter 1, verse number 1. Vayikra Moshe, he called Moshe Vayidaber Elav, and he spoke to him El Moed from the tent of meeting. Rashi says every time God communicated with Moshe, whether it was presented by expression of Vayidaber and he spoke, or Vayomer and he said, or Vayitzav and he commanded, it was always a call. It was always before then was a calling to Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayikriya is expression of affection, the same expression employed by the ministering angels, the Kara, Zel, Zeh, and they call to one to another. So it's a concept where God shows that He loves the Jewish people. To the prophets of the nations of the world, however, is revealed to them an expression denoting coincidence or impurity, as the verse says, Vayakar, that the God chanced upon Bilam. He didn't call him; he chanced upon him. Vayikra Moshe. Rashi says the divine voice emanated and reached Moshe's ears, while the rest of Israel did not hear. But also in such a scripture. This it says Vayidaber Elav, and he spoke to him. That means even though for this expression are employed in the beginning of the major sections, when God spoke first to Moshe and then proceeded with the prophecy at hand, unlike the beginning of each separate section, when God simply continued his communication to Moshe without calling to him anew. Now, if each subsection of the Torah does not represent a new beckoning from God to Moshe, ushering in a new prophecy, then what is the purpose of these, that we have these subsections? To give Moshe a pause to contemplate between one passage and the next law, the next passage, between one subject and another subject. So here God wants to show that you have to, that he gave honor to these subjects, to each subject, that everybody should learn. So too, if God can do that with Moshe Rabbeinu, how much more is when you learn, is necessary when you learn with somebody else, that you should give him time to be able to learn from one subject to another subject. A love, she says, God spoke to Moshe, a love, the phrase comes to exclude anybody else, even Aaron. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseda said there are 13 times in the Torah that God spoke to both Moshe and Aaron together, corresponding to them to the 13 other occasions when God only spoke to Moshe, including Aaron, even Aaron, to teach you that it was said directly to Aaron, but to Moshe, and that he would say it to Aaron. These are the 13 cases which Aaron is precluded. Whenever it says to speak to him, Elav, speaking to him, spoke to him. So whenever it says these expressions, Ladaber itay, medaber Elav, yedaber Elav, and edad tilach, these are all confined in Teras Kayanim. You'll see all these places. So too, the voice came Elav, that it came specifically to him, and the rest of the Jewish people did not hear it. Mayel Mayed, what does it come to teach in the tent of meeting? Rashi says this teaches us that the divine voice stopped and did not project itself beyond the tent of meeting, beyond the Mishkan. One might think that this is because the voice was low. Therefore, the Torah says that when Moshe Rabbeinu came into the tent of meeting, he heard the voice. What's the meaning of the voice when it says the voice? It comes to refer to the voice that's mentioned in Tillim. In Tillim, we mentioned the voice. What is the voice that we mentioned in Tillim? The voice of the Lord breaks cedars. If so, why does it say the voice spoke to him for the tent of meeting? To the point of for divine that the God's voice stopped, so to say. A case similar to where powerful sound other within the holy temple was not heard outside. And the sound of the cherubim wings were heard in the outer court, were not heard in the outer courtyard. One might think that the sound was low. Torah tells us that this sound was the sound of a mighty God who speaks. Why does the verse say that a sound was heard up to the outer courtyard? To tell us that a voice stopped, even though it was a great sound, the voice stopped. One might think it came from the entire building, Therefore, the Torah continues and says, from the cover of the ark. One might think that I'm came from the entire cover. Therefore, it says, from in the midst of the two cherubim. Whenever it says lamer, go forth and to say it to them. Lamer means to repeat it. Well, you're saying God communicated with me. Indeed, we find this, that all the 38 years that the Jews were in the desert, placed under a ban. The incident involved the spies after the Midbar. It happened very quickly after the 2 years already. Later on, the whole story with the spies happened. And then there was excommunication by God. So it was the men of the war finished dying. And after 38 years, where all the Jews, the 600,000 men from 20 and above passed away, then you had the whole thing of the God came back, so to say, and had a conversation with Moshe. Verse number 2, I'll speak to the Jewish people. And tell them, Adam ki yakiv mikem korban. If a man amongst you will bring a sacrifice, Lashem to God, mina behema from the animal, mina baka from the cattle, mina tzayin from the sheep. Takrivas karbanchem, you shall bring your korban. Now she says, Adam ki yakiv mikem. When he brings, the Torah is not dealing with an obligation sacrifice, in which case it would have said, man shall bring. The Torah is talking about voluntary sacrifice. When a man wants to bring a sacrifice. Adam, what is the meaning of man? Adam, why is he called Adam here? Ma Adam initially gezel. Just like Adam didn't bring a sacrifice from something that was stolen, the whole world belonged to him. So too, a person is not allowed to bring a sacrifice if it's stolen. Ha-behema, why did the Torah say an animal? Behema. You might think also undomesticated animals, you can bring a sacrifice, a deer, a gazelle. Therefore, the Torah tells us cattle and flock, it has to be domesticated animals. Min ha-behema, when it says from the animal, v'lei kula, it comes to exclude the animal that was a reiva v'anirva. If there was done bestiality to the animal, or the animal did bestiality, he slept with a human being, it's unfit to be a sacrifice. Min ha-baka, from the cattle, again, it comes to exclude something. As haneved, if a cattle, because those days they used to worship the sheep, and the Torah tells if this sheep was worshipped, cannot be brought as sacrifice. Min hatzain, again, it says min, from the sheep. La'itz is a muktzah. It comes to exclude an animal that was put aside for Avodah Zarah. Umin hatzain, they have an extra vav. Umin hatzain, the extra vav, Rashi says, the Gemara says, Umin hatzain comes to exclude that excludes some a case of a goring animal that killed is not allowed to bring a sacrifice. Now the question is, when the pasuk already says later on, the pasuk says that minabaka. Now, when the scripture already says below in verse number 3, it says minabaka for the cattle. Min meaning not that it's being used. The scripture already taught us the exclusion here. Therefore, the extra word comes to include the treifa. The next verse comes to treifa, an animal which is terminally ill. If it's terminally ill, it cannot be brought as a sacrifice. Takrivu. Now she says the plural takrivu come to teach us that two people can bring a sacrifice together. Karbanchem come to teach, also plural, come to teach us that a burnt offering may also be offered as a voluntary gift from the community, a gift from the community. This sacrifice is called Oilas Kaitz HaMizbeach. The burnt offering was a offering that was the end of that we finished all the sacrifices. There was leftover animals. It was brought as a every year. Each 20-year-old male was taxed, giving a silver coin. Well, we can do it this week. We're going to do it on Tainus Esther. We're going to give Machzah Shekel. That's symbolic to the Machzah Shekel we gave every year. That was used for the sacrificial offerings. And it was left over sometime. It was called Kaitz HaMizbeach. Verse number 3. If the sacrifice of a burnt offering comes from the cattle. Oila is a burnt offering. A burnt offering was brought totally on the Mizbeach. So it needs to be a complete male animal. Al Pesach he's brings to the house to the door of the tent of meeting. Yaakov say we shall sacrifice it. Let's say on his own free will if Hashem before God. Now she says Zachar. The Torah tells it has to be a Zachar v'leina keva. The Torah Nash says in verse number 10, the Torah again says a Zachar. So why you need twice? Comes to teach us it cannot be when you bring it has to be a male, a complete male. It cannot be somebody who's intermediate gender or hermaphrodite. It needs to be that we know the sex gender of the animal. Now, Pesach Hayom, what means to the door of the tent of meeting? He himself must attend to bring it to the courtyard. Why does the verse repeat bring here? When it says he shall bring it, he shall bring it. This repetition teaches us even the case of Reuven's burnt offer animal being mixed up with Shimon's burnt offer animal. And they can't identify it. Nevertheless, each one of them must be offered up its name. I'm sorry. Each one must be offered up. I lost the place. Burnt offering, the animal cannot be identified. Nevertheless, each one must be offered up in the name of its rightful owner, whoever that may be. That means if the guy mixed up his offering, they both bring an oila, and the guy says, listen, if this is Shimon's, it's Shimon's. If it's Reuven's, it's Reuven's. If it's, then they are so to the second one. If it's Reuven's, it's Reuven's. If it's Shimon, it's Shimon. Similarly, if an animal designated for a burnt offering had been mixed up with a non-consecrated animal, the non-consecrated animal must be sold to those who need a burnt offering. And thus all these animals are now designated to become a burnt offering. Accordingly, because that's a koche kochim, as we'll learn. There are certain animals are koche kochim. So a burnt offering, an oila, is a kodesh kadashim. And once you designate it, you cannot change it. And you cannot, if it's lost, there's whole problems with it. So accordingly, each animal is now brought up in the name of rightful owner, whoever it might be. Now, one might think that this must be done. Even the animals designated to become a burnt offering becomes mixed up with animals unfit for sacrifice, with animals that become a different kind of sacrifice. A sin offering, a guilt offering, those kachim, holy of holies. Therefore, the Torah tells you, kivena, meaning he must bring it up. This teaches us that only an animal fit for a specific designation as a burnt offering must be brought up here. And that's why it becomes a very difficult issue. That if you have to know the halachas, that once you designate an animal, you have to be careful. Once you designate an animal, that you make sure that the animal you designated stays separate from other animals. Yakriv oisai. Now she says, now we say in a forceful term, because once you made a commitment, now melamed shekoifen oisai. Now it teaches the person is coerced to bring the offering. If he's remiss in bringing the sacrifice that he promised, he has to bring it. One might think that this means that they should force him against his will to bring an offering. Therefore, the Torah says he shall bring it willingly. Let's say it. Now the question is, we just said we force him. How is it possible that on one hand he shall be forced, yet on the other hand he must bring it willingly? We coerce him. It's a famous Gemara. We coerce him until he says, I want to. The Rebbe says, Siddur explains this expression, the Gemara. Like the Gemara means that everybody really wants to. Once he made a commitment, he really wants to. Sometimes a person has to be coerced to bring out his true essence. Lefnei Hashem, before God, v'samach. So this is a kansa smicha, to play that there was an obligation when a person made a commitment to an animal, he has to put his hands, v'samach yodei alei shapar. He has to lean his hands on the animal. So he, in essence, he has to lead. This is an animal. This is telling us, ain't smicha b'bamis. This was obligation only in the Beis Hamikdash. As the next verse says, he puts his hand, he leans his hand on the head of the oila. It'll be accepted for him, the chaper Allah, to forgive on him. Now she says, this comes to include a oila that's an obligation, the smicha, that you have to lean your hands on the animal, and to bring also that if it's not only on all oilas that you bring, oila pratla oila saif, ha'oila, the oila comes to exclude a bird oila, only an animal oila. You don't have to have smicha, you don't have to lean on a bird, you only have to lean on an animal. What is the meaning? Rashi says, what does this come to forgive? This is an oila. What does an oila come to forgive? This is Mrs. Bezdin or Mrs. Shemayim or Malchus. May you think that it comes to forgive on things that are even between you and God that are punished by death. We know the punishment. So you should know a korban oila, a burnt offering, is given comes to forgive on all positive commandments, because there's no an animal, a chatas was on a sin. So there's no really a korban on a mitzvah asay that I didn't do. And an oila was for all mitzvahs asay, for all positive commandments that I didn't do. I brought an oila, I brought a burnt offering. Verse number 5. Slaughter this ben baka before God. Shall bring it. As Adam, the blood. And they shall spill the blood. They shall spray the blood. They shall spray the blood. Around this altar, which is at the door of the tent of meeting. Now she said that what does the Torah want to teach us? First of all, from the time when the blood was gathered, it's the obligation of the kohen. The shchita, the actual shechting, could be done by a regular Jew. Lefnei Hashem, before God, ba'azara, in the temple, v'hikriv, and he shall bring. What he shall bring? Zu Kabbalah. This is the receiving of the blood. That's the first thing that happened, is receiving of the blood. B'nei Aaron. Rashi says the children of Aaron. One might think that also those that are unfit to be kehanim are included. Tamalayma hakehanim. Therefore, the Torah tells that the only one who can bring the blood on the altar is a kohen, is a person who's fit to be a kohen, who can do the avodah. As Adam v'zarka Adam, Rashi says matal malayma dam shteipan. Why does it say twice blood? to tell us another law. That if blood got mixed up, even blood, if blood got mixed up with other bloods, you can sprinkle it still. You might think that if unfit blood got mixed up with a chatas, you can bring it in. Therefore, the Torah tells us no. Therefore, the Torah tells us the second time, damai, it's blood. You cannot, if your chas shalom got mixed up with unfit blood, if that's possible, then then you're not allowed to use that blood. Now she said, how do they sprinkle it? He would stand on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. He would sprinkle towards the mizbeach. Now the mizbeach had two parts to it: the upper part and the lower part. In the Mishkan, it was the upper part and the lower part was separated by the copper mesh. In the Beis Hamikdash, it was two different levels, and it was indented, the upper part and the lower part. So there were certain bloods that was spilled on the upper part of Mizbeach. There were certain bloods that was sprinkled on the lower part of Mizbeach. And therefore, it was sprinkled on four corners of the Mizbeach. And the kohen would stand on one corner, and he would sprinkle on one shot. He would get both corners. You go to the other corner, right other side. He would sprinkle on that corner, and it would go on both sides. Asher Pesach oil mayed. Rashi said, but not in the tent of meeting. Dissembled. It has to be that the oil mayed, that the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan, is built. Then he shall skin the burnt offering, and he shall cut it into sections. Now she says, why does it says ha'oila? Actually, the hay. The Gemara says it teaches us that all oilas, all burnt offerings, their hide was taken off. Oisel and tzachel. This verse does not say the animal is cut into pieces, but rather into its pieces, implying that it must be cut into specific prescribed pieces and not to cut prescribed pieces into smaller pieces. So this oila need to be cut a certain kind of way. But Nasser Ad bin Aaron Kain Eisham Mizbech, and then Aaron, then the descendants of Aaron, the Kain shall place the fire on the altar. And they shall set the wood upon the altar. Now she said, even though we know the Gemara says that a fire came down from heaven to eat the sacrifice, nevertheless, the Kohen was obligated to do his part and make sure that there's a fire on the Mizbeach. Ben Aaron Kohen, Shehu B'Kehana, that means that, but not Aaron, but we know that Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. So why does Kohen come to teach us that the Kohen Gadol may perform the sacrifice service only when he is invested in his kohuna, that he's wearing his 8 garments? If however a fish day wearing the garments of a regular Kohen, he was unfit to do the service, was unfit. Then Aaron's descendants, the Kehanim, shall arrange the pieces, the head, the fat, aloesh, on the fire, Ashelam Mizbeach, which is on the altar. Now she says, B'nei Aaron HaKehanim, Kisheim B'Kihunim. But we know that Aaron descendants are Kehanim. So why does it say, keep on saying again? The ordinary Kohen must be function in their kohuna, meaning the proper 4 garments of an ordinary Kohen. If the ordinary Kohen officiated wearing the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol of it, his service is rendered invalid. Everybody had to wear their right garments. As an asachim esaresh, since the head is not included in the skinning and the cutting up procedure, since it's detached by the slaughtering, Torah had to count individual to form us that it's placed on the altar even though it's not skinned. As hapada, what does it come to teach us? Why is the fat mentioned separately? To teach you that the kohen must bring it up onto the altar together with the head, and that which covers the areas of the animals that were slaughtered. This was done in deference to the honor of God or Hanahai, because the cut throat is soiled and the blood on the head. Asher al Mizbeach. It actually says the logs of wood must not reject beyond the area of a arranged wood pile. Constitute a 1 square cubit. This is so the Kohanim would not be disturbed when they walked around the top of the Mizbeach. Verse number 9. And his innards and his legs he shall wash he shall wash it with water. And the Kohen shall bring it all on the Mizbeach. This is a burnt offering. It is a fire of a pleasing fragrance to God. Now she says, he has to make it for the sake of an Eilah. When it's slaughtered the animal, he must slaughter it with specific intention to be put on the fire. Every instance to the word Ishay in its expression related to Eish, which means a fire. Nituach, nachas, ruach, lefane. What means nechayach? Means that the God says, this sacrifice gives me content, for I have asked you, I've commanded it, and you fulfilled my commandment. Verse number 10, if he brings an offering of the flock, whether it's from the sheep and the izim or it's from the goats, he has to bring it, it has to be a male sacrifice. The Vav Meisav Alin edition, the Vav adds to the previous statement of the Oila, La Mehifsik. Why did we put a stoppage? Litein Revach LeMoshe. This all comes to give a space for Moshe Rabbeinu to understand the law. minatzei minakvasim, and a gimel miyutim. Over here, minatzei minakvasim, from. It comes to exclude that it's not only be an old animal, it can be a sick animal, and it can be a foul-smelling animal. You need to bring a healthy, clean, beautiful animal. Verse 11, you shall slaughter the animal on the north side of the altar. As Aaron and then Aaron Kahanim will sprinkle its blood on Mizbeach Saviv around the altar. Outside of Mizbeach on the side of the altar, Tzafeina, it needs to be on the north side of the altar. Verse 12, and you shall cut it to its pieces. That's Areish, the head, Vespidre, and it's fat, and Kayin will bring it on the wood. Ashel al Aish, which is on the fire, Ashel al Mizbeach, which is on the altar. And the innards and the legs, Yichas b'mayim shall wash with water. V'ikra v'akayin sakel, and Kayin shall bring it all. V'ikter al Mizbecha, and he shall bring it as an offering or burn it on the altar. Oilahu, it's an oila, it's a burnt offering. Ishay reach nechayach l'Hashem, it's a fire, beautiful fragrance to God. That finished the Chumash for today. We go to the Tanya of the day. It's a well-known statement of our rabbis that declared that the whole purpose of the creation of the world was for one reason. That God, blessed be He, had a desire to have a abode in this lower realm. Meaning, his desire that the essence of Ein Sof be revealed as it is, without veil or concealment, amongst the lower creations. Our sages use the word abode or dwelling place, bias, to describe such revelation. So just as a man's home serves as an abode for his essence, so too this world is intended to be an abode for God's essence. So the Rebbe goes now to explain the phrase the lower realm mentioned above, Tachtonim. And he shows that this refers specifically to our physical world. Explanation in brief, the term higher and lower realms do not denote degrees of respective importance in the sight of God or the closeness to Him. In God's eyes, all the worlds, from the highest to the lowest, are equal insignificant. All are equal remote for Him. On the other hand, He fills the lowest world just as He fills the highest world. Thus, the term higher and lower in Chassidus, whenever you learn higher and lower, you cannot take it as a human, as we understand higher and lower. It must be understood in the standard of comparison within the numerous worlds. They indicate to what degree godliness is revealed. Again, it's the concept of revelation. We went through this over and over. Where God is revealed more is a higher world. It can be you can have two people can be in the same world, and both one of them is in a higher world and the other one is in a lower world. It's all about revelation of godliness in the world. The more revelation, the higher the world. The more obscure and concealment, the lower. From this standpoint, our physical world is the lowest. Why? Even though it's the highest, it's the most important, because there's no revelation until Mashiach comes. For here, godliness is most veiled and concealed. That's why it's called Olam Chassidus. Olam means concealment. The Alter Rebbe's word. But surely to God, there's no concept of below and above. There's no concept. Because the Eibishter fills all the world. He fills all the world. B'shava, equally. So what is the meaning of I say that God desired abode in the lower realms? But the meaning is before the world was created, before the world was created, He was alone, one and unique. Filling the space in which He created the world, anything that could be conceived. of as a space or possibility for creation was filled. So that's why it was eight. It was eight. Everything was nothing, because God filled the world. And when God fills the world, everything is nothing. When God reveals himself in the world, everything is nothing. And the truth is, it's now the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. Right now, God fills the world. To the Eibush, he fills the world. The Eibush to the God, Ani Hashem Leishanisi. Before creation, after creation, there's nothing. There is nothing, because God fills the world. But we are here also. That's the problem, because God wanted us here, and therefore God made it that to us it's hidden. This change applies only to the recipient. In verifying force of his light. Before creation, there was none to receive the divine life force. Creation brought into being these recipients, and that's creation. Creation is that God gives space for creation. God gives space for concept that won't feel him, that won't be that his revelation won't be revealed. Because if God would reveal his revelation, we would all disappear. We would become like Ayin before. Because they receive their force through numerous garments, which veil and conceal the light of God. For without such garments, they could not bear the intensity, and they would cease to exist. As the pasuk says, no man can see me and live. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to have a greater revelation. God said, you're going to have any more revelation than you have, you're going to disappear. Furthermore, not only man, a physical being, but even a spiritual being, such as angels, are unable to receive divine light and life force without concealing garments. Nobody, not angels, because angels are creation. Surely man, who's a physical creation. That he, as the rabbis of memory, great blessed memory, interpret the word v'chai, the verse referring to angels, as the angels are called chayes. Ein royin, cannot see godliness except by the way of garments which conceal him and enable them to conceive his light. The degree of concealment varies, however, from world to world, from level to level. Here, the distinction between higher and lower realms become valid. As Alter Rebbe continued, and this is the concept of ishtalshlus, the chain-like graded downward succession. To go from level to level, through the many garments and concealed light and the life force emanating from him, and more concealment and a lower descent, until this physical was created, and this gross world. This world, the lowest degree, and there's nothing lower than this world. The concept of God's concealment. It's a double and redoubled darkness. So nowhere is God's light as hidden as in this world. That's why this world is full of klippos, full of coverings and other side things. That can be totally against God and against the truth. That this world says, I, and nothing else lives besides me. That's this world. I am here, and there's nothing else besides me. Thus, the term, the lower realm, refers to the physical world, and the lowest of degree of divine revelation. And that completes the Tanya for today. Today is the 7th day of the month, which is chapter 39 to chapter 43 in your Tillim, chapter 39 to chapter 43, your Tillim. If you do those Tillims, you do the Chitas of the day. I want to welcome you all. Make sure at 10 o'clock we'll continue to learn Chassidus together. Either come to JEI at the shopping center, or on this Zoom number, or direct. And if surely Mitzvah will see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we'll continue the Chitas of the day. Have a wonderful